Hey everybody, welcome back to another Coalition Revisited. This time around, I'm alone, which should massively reduce the length of this video, so you don't have to listen to me and someone else ramble on for hours. I think originally I wanted to do it in a in alphabetical order, I believe. No, not alphabetical order. You know, the order that you see in the armory on top. That's what I meant. Anyways, but I thought Scandinavia, especially since I had decent success in the tournament with this deck, which could have also been luck. Let's be real. I think I have a decent idea on how to properly play this deck now, because as you might know, I had some troubles with Scandinavia in the past, especially when playing against Greyhound's check deck. So I thought, I think it's a good time to do Coalition Revisited on Scandinavia. So yeah, let's get right into it. Logistics pretty straightforward. Unfortunately, you don't have a 30 point supply truck, but unlike Baltic, you at least get 20 points. You have some very good CV options. If you want like a cheap but still mobile or somewhat mobile armored CV, this is your choice. Enough armor to withstand most artillery decently. You can also take the Centurion, which is slower, has more front armor and a gun though. It's not a particularly great gun, but you have a better MG and still it's better against, like, if there should be an autocannon vehicle, you should be able to win, at least if it comes up from the front of you. You do get worse availability though. Personally, I prefer the STRB strip BV, which strips down its okay, I shouldn't try to do some cringy joke. And then there's also the Stridswagen 103. Now, the only armored CV that you can get, unlike this one that is armored. I'm not a fan of this one, but yeah, I like the 103 as well, sort of. It's a bit more expensive, but again, you get the amphibious capability and you're a bit faster off-road than the Centurion. But personally, I just like this one. And then you get the best Jeep CV in the game because you have 7 availability like the others, and for 5 points more you get massive off-road speed. Okay, I take it back. Maybe the Humvee is the best CV because it has cheap CV because it has 10 HP and a Browning. But this one is just actually ridiculous. Not ridiculous. It's not a huge deal, but it's still, like, I don't get why. It's a big deal on the 5-point truck, as you'll see in a bit. But it's actually really one of the best Jeep. Not cheap as in it costs, doesn't cost much, more like cheap as in the vehicle. As per infantry CV, you get a Lynx, which is a very fast small helicopter. Unfortunately, you don't get something like a Mi-8 MTV or a Panther or a Lynx AH7, but it's fine. And for wheels, you get the XAs. And on top of that, Danish and Norwegian CV even has MG3s and a battle rifle. should it end up having to fight. Overall, some very good CV choices. Unfortunately, no wheel CV with 2 top armor, which would have been interesting. But I don't think there's any wheel CV with 2 top armor. But again, it would have been interesting. Infantry, oh boy, there's so much to choose from. I never built a Scandinavian, like even in mech, I there's so much that I want to fit in. So much. First of all, never really take the FSK, honestly. Never take the FSK. I would always take the Fast Skirmisher 90. First of all, you don't really need more than 1 card because you get 15 of the Fast Skirmisher 90 and only 9 of FSK. Second of all, and that's actually a pretty huge deal. Usually I'm not really a fan of 15-man squads, but generally a 5-man extra costs just as much as the another training step, meaning that usually Fast Skirmisher 90 would cost just as much as FSK, which they don't, but should most likely. So that's nice, I guess. They're probably 5 points cheaper than they should be. Second of all, the way the Eric's works, you need to be basically alive once you fire it in order for it to hit, and that's where the 15-man come into play. They're actually ridiculously helpful for using your Erics in forests, and in a defensive position, they're so hard to deal with, especially where you can't position your fire support far enough away. And the 12 Ericsson files, the fast Mega 90 with 15 HP it's actually a huge deal. So I would always take fast Mega 90 instead of FSK. And obviously take them, even if you wouldn't take FSK, just take them because they're fucking Erics. But yeah, 15 man, one of the few times where I actually really prefer the 15 man squads. Personally, I like to take them in the XA, I know, because of the front armor. Yeah, don't take FSK. FKP are really useless. There's no reason to take them. They're okay against infantry because of the mini-me, but suppose they have the links, but they don't have any good trick. Just ignore them. Okay, I'm not gonna really tell you what else to use, but I'm just gonna give you good options. Very good is Dragoner in this 5-pointer, because that one, the second one, the 113G, has 2 front and side armor, which is big, and you don't lose availability. So if you want very cheap grinding or a mixed infantry that you can use for grinding as well as meat shields very effectively, this is your choice. Maybe even 2 cards if that's your playstyle. That's very good. Not as good as Rovade against, let's say, vehicles or cheap IFVs in forests, because they only have 13 AP. But against other infantry, they're just really strong. Then you have... personally, I don't like to use it very much, but you can also use Gewehrman or Gewehrman 90 in the NM135, especially the base ones. It's 20 points for an IFV that has a very high rate of fire autocannon. Not the best accuracy and range, but they're just there for spamming. Just keep in mind it has only 1 front armor, meaning that against basically any other IFV, they'll most likely lose, even if you're 2 or 3 to 1 outnumbering the vehicle. If you want to do that, I would take base Gewehrman because they're 5 points cheaper, and 20 versus 25 points when you're spamming these kind of units. That's a big deal. Gewehrman 90 and the CV90, you don't get the base ones. CV90 is amazing. Personally, I prefer to take Stormer, but if you want to take the cheapest CV90 possible, I think that's your choice. I don't think we get base Storm Engineer. Yeah. Either those or Storm Engineer 90. If you want to take them cheap, I take these ones, because then your CV90 has a 10 man or 10 HP meat shield as opposed to 5 HP if you were to take the Storm Engineer. Personally, I like to take Stormer myself. I don't know, it's just nice to have more independent, is not a way to say it, but more capable infantry squad to fight alongside the CV90. And usually I don't really, I mean, it's unless you're like not particularly great or you're way too aggressive, it's actually, I wouldn't say hard, but it's you don't lose them as easily. So keeping them alive is especially with Scandi, because your infantry is so strong, it's actually some easier than with other nations to keep your IFV alive, and your CV90 can really do a lot of damage over time with that amazing autocannon. I used to like these. I still think they're not that bad. Reservists with MG, only 10 HP. You pay 10 points, but your 5 points transport is weird. So you pay 15 points for a wheeled MG3, which isn't bad. I wouldn't take it anymore. I still think it's an okay choice, but I think I may have overestimated it, and yeah, it's just not that great anymore, I think. But it's not the worst of choices. Music 90, personally I'm not a fan of it. Nick the Man likes it. 20 RPM, 25 AP, ridiculously strong in forests. Not the best, actually pretty mediocre anti-infantry capabilities for elite squads. Accuracy is also not that great. The main problem I have with those is they're just very niche. Sure, they murder every vehicle in forests, but excuse me, outside of forests, they're just not that particularly strong for 45 points or more. So I find Fast Gaming and I need to do the same job. Maybe they're not as good in forests, but outside of forests, they're just doing a much better job, and they're more versatile. LHV, if you want the cheapest possible spam infantry, but keep in mind the transport has only 1 front armor, which doesn't make it as great. Lift Garden, very good shock infantry. Again, if you take Lift Garden, which is a perfectly fine choice, I take them into 5-point transports with 2 front armor. Lift Garden 85. In a normal Scandinavian deck, I wouldn't bother with them. There's a point to be made to take them in mech, which is the only specialization that I'd play. With Scandi, if you were to take a specialization, either spec or unspec, either mech or unspec. In the mech deck, I take 1 card of those just because of the range and because your FSK, Fallskirming Gennady, can come in helicopters only. But outside of a mech deck, there's not really a choice. You don't get a huge deal. The range is the biggest thing, but the 2 extra AP isn't that huge, and the 5 points is just, you always have Fallskirming Gennady if you want some anti-tank capabilities. Man pants, you get a Sea Stinger, which is alright. You also get the RBS 90, which is very good range, but is guided and not fire and forget, and only has 4 HE. Some people like to run the RBS 90 and the SCRF 90 in mech deck. Personally, I mean, I can see why, because you don't get the what's it called, the RBS 90 cheap, but I don't know. I haven't played mech in a while, so I can't say what I'd run. I'd probably run it in a, oh, you're right, Sweden doesn't have 5-point APCs. I always forget. That's so annoying. I don't know. Sea Stinger is also pretty nice. Jägare are actually not that bad, but they're basically doing the same thing as Fallskirming Gennady, but worse. They're very good in a defensive position. They do have more range, but only 12 AP and 30% accuracy. Yeah, the only role is really to be in a defensive position in a town where they're very good even on their own. But again, Fallskirming Gennady can more or less do the same thing. Generally better and are more versatile. They're a fun little unit, but not particularly great. Panzer Scutter, the only reason to use the 90s is the SCRF 90 if you want it cheap. There's no other reason to use them really. So, I mean, you have to pay at least 25 points for them because they're not no 5-point APCs. So at least 25 points for an 84 is not. You're only really at ATGM capability. It's pretty good. You only have good stealth, so you're detected earlier, but you also have 5 HP, that meaning if you're spotted and if you're in a town, which you most likely are, it's gonna take quite a few shots until you're actually dead. So that can sometimes be frustrating for someone attacking into them. Just keep in mind, they don't have the best range. Many, I include myself with that, like to run it with the SCRF 9040. It's pretty expensive, but it's also very capable. And you don't really need to spam them because it's generally, that again, they're pretty survivable. So you don't need to rebuy them every time. Also, they come with 8 missiles instead of 6 because they're 5-man squads. Stormer. The only reason to take Stormer is either if you want a wheeled sort of spam. Not really spam, but Stormer the XA, I know, it's like a very typical, very solid infantry choice. Just very solid, very flexible, fast, not too expensive, still spammable in a way. Just a very solid combination if you want that, or maybe just one. I like to take one card, I believe, just to have cheaper but very capable town. Jesus Christ, sorry, it's very early. But capable town fighting infantry squad, or just shock infantry squad, because Fallskirming Gennady are just a bit too expensive for 40 points. Like I said, I like to run them with a CV90 as well. If you want to run them cheap in the 5-pointer, just take the Lift Garden. Lift Garden are literally stat copies, or Stormer stat copies of Lift Garden, depending on what you want to look at, with a better 5-point transport. Running them in the NM135 is not the best idea in my opinion, because very often they get killed, and if the Stormer are inside, they're gonna be out in the open, or gonna be stunned, and then they're just gonna get killed. So don't run them in the NM135, honestly. Not a huge fan of these. Not a huge fan of these either, honestly. They're not really terrible, but they have only 5 HP and they're slow, and Barracks against infantry isn't what it used to be when it was broken and literally panicked at one shot and stunned. Yeah, honestly, not a fan. Yeah, ignore those either as well. Support. That's one awkward thing. So, Scandinavia, just to sum up Scandinavia, it's just fucking awkwardness. In support, you have very good radar. You have the LVKV-90, which isn't really great against aerial targets. Even against helicopter, it somewhat struggles. But what you pay for is that it's also very good ground support unit. So imagine it without the ground range and without the AP rounds. It would probably cost something like 30-35 points. But then you pay 15-20 points extra just for the ability to have basically a very strong IFV as well, with 1.5 HE, mind you, which is more than the SCRF-90. You have the automatic, you have the NOAA, which is in my opinion the best Hawk version in the game, and the only really good ones in my opinion. The NASAMS, I don't think it's that bad, honestly. I still wouldn't take it though, because it's just awkward and easy to lose and micro intensive and easily runs out, but it's honestly not as bad as some people sometimes make it out to be. At the same time, it's also not nearly as strong as sometimes people make it out to be. I think it's one of those units that people talk to shit when it's not that bad, but other people at the same time also hail it as one of the most OP broken units when it's really not. RBS-90 is a good unit. It's just, if it's your only really flexible non-radar area, it's gonna be very, very annoying. Helicopter drops are just gonna be ridiculously strong. Seed spam and like air spam can really fuck you up easily. Yeah, that's just one of the huge problems Scandinavia has. But my main point is actually that if you're playing Scandinavia, at least in a 1 versus 1, and you want to be somewhat successful against decent players, and you're not playing mech, I honestly think that you're gonna have the best chances if you're gonna play with the beacon and the fob. Just because you have so many deficits, and the automatic, which is a huge, and that, okay, let me say it this way: your infantry is ridiculously good, but it only gets you so far. You don't really have the tank support because your tanks are all more or less below average, other than the 1-to-1, which gets outclassed by super heavy or gets easily killed by an anti-tank plane. Your helicopters are more or less pretty bad, except for the Fennec Tower 2. Your fire support is okay with the IFVs, but it's again mainly the tank support and the fact that your AA is awkward. It makes your life very hard. So one of the things that can make your life very easy is the beacon 1C. Personally, before I get into how to use them, I'd like to take them trained, but basically only use them once. I only use one of them unless it dies, in which case you're in a bad position. I think hang on, let me see my deck. I think I only use one beacon in my 1 versus 1 deck. Oh no, I did upvet it. Okay, never mind. Sorry for the confusion. Alright. I did upvet it because base accuracy is lower than other. Okay. Sorry for the confusion. One thing to note is that the beacon 1C and the Mister are the only 10 seconds aim time artillery, I believe, and the Mister clone that Finland has. I believe those are the only ones that have a dispersion of 4,550 meters, whereas every other artillery has 3,900 something. I don't know it off the top of my head. It's every other 10-second aim time artillery is more accurate, which is why I upweighted. It's still not as accurate as others, but it's accurate enough, at the same time inaccurate enough, because you don't always want to be your artillery to be pinpoint accurate, especially with the beacon, simply because it fires so many rounds. It's basically like a bomber, you know, so you always want to hit like somewhat big area of effect, right? Make sure there's nothing in there anymore. But when it comes to beacon usage, don't just use it for CV sniping. Even if you see me use it for there's always time for using CV. No, let me put it this way. Sorry, it's just early in the morning. There's always gonna be a good situation when to CV snipe or try to CV snipe, but you have to realize that oftentimes it's not. You just have to realize when the situation comes up. It's very hard to explain. Sorry for stumbling over my words again. But most of the time it's just important to weaken, stun, panic enemy unit positions. Especially if your enemy is not very aggressive, you can really get away with buying a beacon early, and like a couple of minutes in, and then start pounding down on him. Certain maps are obviously very good for that, like Paddyfield, where the front line is not very wide. There's not a lot of cover, obvious positions where your enemy has units in, and when you can sneak a Recon unit around, oh boy, you're gonna have a field day. The beacon is just so impactful, and with 10 seconds aim time and the rate of fire it has, it just can output so much damage. It is ridiculous. And like I said, I think it's the only really unit that sort of equalizes the playing field against many other coalitions. Granted, it is somewhat cancerous, and when I played against Nick using the beacon, I hated it myself. But it's certainly something that you can play against. It's just most of the time you are not used to playing against something like this, so it's gonna take a time to adjust. But it's not like impossible to play against it, so it's like an auto lose, because it's still a 130 points investment that most of the time doesn't pay off immediately, or it doesn't pay off until a couple of minutes in. So the other thing that you have to look at is the beacon won't see still. Even if you use only one, it eats supply as nothing else. So be mindful when using it. Don't always use the full 14-round salvo if you don't need it. You know, it's easy to run out of your fob. Even if you don't use it continuously, it's still easy to run out. So make sure that you're careful with using it. Yeah, if it's really hard to explain, but if you want to see, I'm not saying I'm the best at it, but if you want to see decent beacon usage, watch my tournament games if you haven't already, where I played Scandinavia. Then when it comes to A, obviously automatic. I don't think I need to say much anymore. Just be careful because it's radar and it's expensive. Obviously downwetted. The NM 145 is not particularly great. Personally, I prefer the 40-point mortar. Amos it's a nice meme little unit, but it's even worse than a beacon when it comes to using supplies, and it's not really that great, trust me. And it's really bad for making smoke because it has only 42 rounds, and he always uses 2 at the same time. So don't bother with that. And some people like the Eon Hawk. Not a fan of it. It's not bad, but I just don't like it personally. But if you're not good at radar micro, go for it. Obviously, I'd up with it. Just be careful that it's an artillery magnet. I don't really like the cluster M270s, but when you have the beacon, you don't really need any other heavy artillery. RBS 90 is basically a must. Up with it. 7 is more than enough. Yeah, tanks. Well, main problem is not necessarily that the STRV 1-1 is the heaviest tank. The main problem is not even that, honestly. I think the main problem is that between the 1-1 and the 1A5 NO2, there's only 2 weird ass tanks that aren't even proper tanks. And I don't mean like they weren't tanks because they don't have a turret or something, you know, they were designated as tanks by the Swedish army as far as I know. But just they have no stabilizer, they have no turret, which makes their gameplay pretty awkward. They are strong in many situations, but they're also weak in many situations. And they're just not the same as something like a Leopard 1 or Leopard 2. And the fact that there's nothing really between those two is very, very awkward. And the fact that none of your tanks up until from like 30 points onwards or something have more armor than AP is a huge deal. Because there's no tank that you can really buy against, let's say, an enemy who uses just spams IFVs and infantry or something, who relies on non-tank units to kill your tanks, where your AP isn't as important, but your armor is a lot more. Something like a Challenger or something, or even something where the armor is closer to the AP, like a Leopard 2, or something along those lines. You don't have, meaning you always pay for a good amount of AP, and you don't always want that. So having nothing between the 1-to-1 and the 1-5 NO2 is just a huge problem that you can't really overcome properly. The best way to overcome with that is probably using smoke and spamming your own Erics and IFVs, and just microing your tanks as good as possible. For a 1 versus 1, you can get away with only one card of 1-to-1s. I like to run 2 Hardens, I believe. In a team game, obviously 6 trained. And then, personally, again, like I said, I'm not a fan of the SRV. You can obviously use it. If you're gonna use the SRV, I'd always would go for the D version. The extra armor is very nice. You're not gonna get a one-shot by 30 AP heat missiles. AP, obviously. Medium optics is actually a big deal. And then you can run the 1-5 or the 1-5 NO2, and that's really all that you need. You don't really need any cheap tanks because you have the CV90 and Erics. Honorable mention, the 1A1 NO 45 points for 15 AP is kind of funny. It's not that great though. Recon has a lot of good units. You have a Scout Defender, which is basically a must, at least in 1 versus 1s. Never take this one, trust me, just don't. Exceptional Recon optics on ground units that are where you literally only pay for the optics is just not worth it. They're gonna get killed way too easily and spotted way too easily. Here again, the only 5-point truck that has this much off-road speed is it's actually huge. I'm not joking. When it comes to always take Falske Jäger in the TGB, it's actually huge. You might not notice it in the game, but it's actually a big deal. Yeah, always take them in these, trust me. And they're also available mechanized, which makes it even better. I personally like to run Jäger 19 at links, just to have like a more capable Recon squad, also better, more into tank and in a helicopter, because I have nothing else in a helicopter other than my CV maybe. Jäger 90 are pretty good. They have a mini-me and they have an SMG, which on elite squads is very nice. And if you want to sneak them around and snipe some shit, you have a good range and a tank weapon as well. So this is actually where the extra range is very helpful. Will cut very nice. Definitely a very good choice. Some people still like the Panzer Will. It's not a bad choice. It's very fast. It's gonna kill anything that doesn't have any actual weapon, basically. But it's gonna get killed by anything that has like a light autocannon because it's 1 armor and bad gun. You're gonna run out of them pretty quickly though, because they're only 15 points and you get only 14. Some people also like to run the M41A1. Same problem, you're gonna run it very quickly out of them. They're very good, even though they only have 200 kilometers autonomy. But they're also gonna run. You also have only 14 per card. So I think in a normal Scandinavia or Scandinavian or even in a mech deck, I wouldn't run them personally. 2-man sniper squads, which I think are a bit underrated. There's a good reason to take them when you have the beacon, just because to sneak them around and spot for shit. I take them in the XA180 because it has off-road speed, and you don't really need the armor since you're gonna sneak them around anyways. Since it is amphibious, that's what I meant to say. Not really worth it, not 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 worth it. Sorry, I'm kind of skipping through this, but I want to get this video out today still because I didn't have anything prepared. So yeah, I'm literally recording this like 2 hours before you're gonna see this, or 3 hours. AKB 105, honorable mention, it kind of fills the role of a cheap tank as well. If you run like nothing below an SCRV or something, it's a decent choice. Just keep in mind it has only 3 armor. This is basically a Wildcat without optics and stealth for 5 points cheaper. Honestly, not a bad choice. If you don't have the Wildcat in the Recon type, it's actually very good for base defense. Laura Tattoo is a very cheap tattoo Jeep. It's honestly not too bad. I think Tau 2 Jeeps are a bit underrated. There's a 5.01 where you get only 4 if you prefer that. That's really all there is to it. The 10-point APCs with recoilless rifles are not worth it, at least not in Scandinavia, because you have good fire support with your infantry. The Fennecs are actually pretty good. The Fennec 20mm not so much because it has no turret, but it's good for like putting on flanks, and potentially killing other helicopters. If you have the space, put it in. Fennec Tau 2 is actually really good, no joke. For 55 points, you get very small, fast, and 6 HP, which just to me is actually a big deal. In team games, not so much, but in 1 versus 1s. And Tau 2 is just very accurate. That's an important thing with helicopters. Generally, if you expect them to have line of sight or something that you want to kill, attack move them most of the time, because as soon as if you attack move them, then they're gonna stop moving as soon as they can, and then the accuracy instantly jumps up to the 70% accuracy, or the stationary accuracy. Air. So Scandinavia is a deck with which you can air cancer, if that's a way to describe it. What I mean with that is you keep sniping enemy AA with your planes or other units and just keep on spamming planes and bombers and fucking up with that. It's certainly possible. Scandinavia has planes to do that properly with, but it doesn't have as good stealth or medium stealth Recon helicopter like the Ninja, like the Tiger, like the KA-52, which makes this harder than it is for those 3 nations. So I wouldn't really bank on this, but it is still one of the better nations to do it with if you are that type of player. MLU is very good for that. The Block 5, the Fighting Falcon, you have some very good anti-ground planes. F100D for a very good rocket pod plane. You have Greyhound really likes to use it. It's basically a peace rhine, but less accuracy. A bit more ECM. No anti-air missiles, no gun. Personally, I don't like it, but SK-60P used to be really good until the missiles got fucked, which is probably for the better. The PAF is a good plane for 1 versus 1s. I don't really like it in team games because there's no stealth and it's slow and it doesn't have a lot of range on the missiles. The biggest thing is that in 1 versus 1s, it's also a very cheap anti-helicopter plane and a very good anti-helicopter plane because the gun, even though it doesn't look like it, has the same rate of fire as a Vulcan. This Vulcan here, which is basically the best gun you can get on a plane, which is very helpful against helicopters. The speed makes it also easy to kill helicopters, and yeah. If you wanna, some people like the Recon. Personally, I'm not a fan of it because it has such a low AoE, whereas the Block 5 has a huge one, and the Block 5 is significantly less survivable, less ECM, and it takes longer to drop the bombs, which means it goes in deeper. But the thing with the Block 5 is more like, not literally, but it is more like a guaranteed 5 to 8 damage to a tank, whereas the Recon is like a 20% chance to kill the tank. You know, I don't like the Recon. It's way too easy to avoid, which is why I suggest using the Block 5 if you want to run a cluster plane, which I'd suggested you because it's one of the few good cluster planes. So some people like to run the MLU on Elite. I think it's always depending on playstyle. I started to not do it anymore. But that's a good point because it's also rather expensive. I'd always run a Block 15 as an ASF, 2 Elite, very good ASF. Fighting Falcon if you want an HE bomber, PAF upwitted for sure. And then as last plane, the cluster plane. That's what like a more or less standard plane type looks like. I don't think I have I think I've only 4 planes in my deck, right? Yeah, I only have 4 planes. You can easily play with 5 planes, especially in a mech deck. Yeah, but like I said, the main thing with Scandinavia is in 1 versus 1. I think if you want to have success with it, you probably should play with a beacon, or at least try it out. It's gonna be awkward You're not gonna be very aggressive at the start because you have to start with the fob. Yeah, if you're not used to using a fob and artillery, I mean, I'm not saying you can't make it work without a beacon, but I think the best way to play Ansmech is probably with a beacon. Mech deck should be fairly straightforward. It's not too different from other mech decks. You still don't really have the best tanks, but since you have so much good infantry, just try to use your planes as best as possible, of course. In team games, just don't go on the sides where you need super heavies. What I mean with that is don't go on the open side of Paddy Field, for example. Instead, go to mid or the plateau, etc., etc. In Bloody Ridge, don't go into the middle part. It's if you're doubling on such a side, it's perfectly fine to go there where your buddy or something buys all the heavy tanks and you just buy all the support units with SGR 1-2 behind instead of 23 AP. But don't go there on your own unless your your teammates play decks with even worse tanks. Other than that, it's honestly not too bad in team games. And in 2 versus 2, depending on the map, it can be a bit awkward, but it's certainly workable. Generally in team games, these kind of weaknesses aren't as huge, but there's always exceptions, of course. Another thing for the Fennec Tattoo, I think what people, and that includes me until very, very recently, don't realize, for 55 points, you get a fucking chopper that can really fuck up enemy openers if there's no wheeled AA. Basically, it's like an MITKT, which some people like to start with for flanks or for stopping openers or something. It basically does the same. And if it arrives, you have a tank destroyer at hand. Sure, it's always a bit hard to use anti-tank helicopters in fortified positions, but if the enemy is attacking with a tank or something, the AA is not quite right behind, they can really do a lot of damage. I think they also did a very good amount of damage against Greyhound on Punchbowl in the tournament. Yeah, kind of a quick episode early in the morning. Sorry for stumbling upon my words and such. Just wanted to get a video out for today. I also might stream later. I'm most likely gonna stream some point this week, possibly later today. No guarantees yet. Just keep an eye out. I think when it's like around 8-9 p.m. European time, so about 8 hours when this video comes out, ideally. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something. I'm not gonna show what nation or coalition I'm gonna go over next. Maybe suggest something in the comments. Probably Red 4, because I did 2 Blue 4 in a row. And yeah, hope you enjoyed it, and I'll hopefully see you next time.